All right, so we are going to go over this chapter, which is arrays and arrays or array list, and we'll touch on, let's start with some of the objectives that we have in this chapter. Again, this is something that you must have seen with your COP 1000, so you already have some basics, but the syntaxes are going to be a little different. So we will look into, first of all, creating an array. And why is it that we would create an array? Because it makes it much easier to handle different kinds of variables or different kinds of memories. Remember when we were defining our variables, so if we want to add, let's say, 5 numbers, so far what we had been doing was define 5 variables, int num1, num2, num3, num4, num5, and then store the values in, and then we have to go into the num1 and extract the values. But with arrays, what it lets us do is it lets us create a group of one variable of the same type, okay, and then store multiple values in that array, okay. So the individual values that are stored in the individual elements of an array. So the terminology with arrays is you create an array with a size. So you're going to say, okay, I want to create an array of the type integer or double or a string, but then I have to define a size. So I would say 5 or 4 or 3 or 10, and then I can go in and store the values on the individual elements. So my very first element of an array would be referred to within a square bracket with a value of 0. So you always see an integer value or integer element value, and then the next one is going to be 1, the next one is going to be 2. So you're going to be creating your value or storing your values in that array. So in this chapter, we will look into the creation of an array, the manipulation of an array, and then applying those arrays in particular programs. And some of these things could be applied to what you have already done in your prior examples. For examples, remember those grades that you did? Okay, you can now define an array and store all the grades in one place, and then reach out and grab that grade and do whatever you need to do. So it could be, you know, the average, the sum, the, you know, the changing it from the grade to an, you know, letter grade. So anything that you can do, you could probably do a better job with an array. So we will look into all different kinds of how we can manipulate array, and then we will look into several examples to show you how the arrays are being done. And then we'll also look into something new which is called exception handling, which is nothing but having a way in your program where you would write try catch blocks, where if you think that that particular method or whatever it's trying to do may have an error, you will keep, or you're going to create a way where you can exit it gracefully, or you can catch the error and continue with it. So we'll, you know, touch a little bit on the try catch, but then there are more try catch that we will actually have another full chapter, but it's a pretty simple concept. I'll go over that. And then we will also talk about some of the methods that are already written in the array class. Okay, now we already know about the class and the object, so we will look into how arrays can be done. You can write your own methods, so go in and, you know, pass your array elements and all that stuff. But then there are methods that are already written in the array class, which you can now access by just calling in the array and the method name. Okay, so we'll look into several of those programs as well. All right, so let's start off with some programs. So I'm going to bring on the very first one, which is the simplest one, which is my init array, and this is something that we have been doing. So I'm going to copy this one and create my new class over here. So I'm going to come in, create my class called and I do not want the public static void main, so I'm going to just finish it, and this creates this, and then I'll bring my program over here. So in this one, what it's trying to show you is you can create something where not only are you creating an array, but you actually create or add some values to it. There are actually a few other programs that we can look at which would also show you how you can create a new array. So, and they are pretty much the same, but let me just type it in over here. So this is one way of creating an array where you say the type that an array is going to hold, the type of values, and then you come up with a name of the array, and then within the curly brackets you would actually assign the values in there. So 32, 27, 64, okay? So one thing you're not seeing is you do not see a size, okay? But instead you actually see some values, and the Java IDE knows that depending upon the number of values, that how many or what kind of an array size I would need. Now the other way of doing this could be something like int So now I have now created the second array of the type int of the size 5. So now I know that my array 2 has 5 elements or 5 spaces that I can store my value. So the other init array that the book introduces is just that. So there are several ways of writing it. I just started with the second one, where you can also do an array and define the values, or you can come in and do something like this. All right. Now if I want, I can also assign zero, could be 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So I can also assign values like this. So then I have two arrays that I created, one with all these numbers, and the second one I created with just the size first and then assign the values. And I can do something like this. So I'll run it in just a minute. All right, so let's run through the program really quick. So I start my init array, that's my class, then I have my main method. I define two arrays. One is my array, and then within curly brackets I assign all the values. The second one I assign called array number 2, and this is another way of declaring and creating my new array. I'm using the keyword new, and you have seen the use of new before with our object, and with your array the same thing. You're actually creating an array object. We're calling it array number 2, and that's the 5, that's your integer. And then I can come in and go to the individual elements. So these are the ones that I'm talking about, are the elements. So when I say array 2 0, that's my first element. It always starts with 0th element, and then the last value is always going to be 1 less than the size of an array, because we start at 0, right? So if I want to create 5, it still creates 5 of those spaces. So 1 2 3 4 5, but since it starts with 0, the last element is always going to be 1 less than the array number. I'm sorry, array size. And then I have a system out print line. Now this is something that I wanted to point out. When I was grading, I saw a few people talk about, I do not know how to write my 2 decimals. Okay, remember we use a printf and a percent, like 5.2f if it is a double digit, if it's a decimal. So 5.2 allows you to have 2 decimals to the right, and 5 is the total space. So it is actually 3 and 2. So 3 to the left of the decimal and 2 to the right of the decimal. So if you want to format your output, then that's what you do. Okay, so in this case, you know, we are using a printf, but look what we are doing. I say %s, so that's a string, then %8s, so it's going to give you that space. Okay, so that's what your 8s is doing, and then s again and %n. Okay, %n basically takes you to the next line, and then you have the string index and string value. So that's why you have 2 of these strings, right? But this 8s gives you this space in between. All right, and then I have a for loop, int counter equals 0, counter less than array dot length. Now this is something that we can do. I do not have to know the length of an array. If I just call that array dot length, it tells me what array size it is. So then I have my counter. Okay, so remember how my for loop goes. Starts with 0, then comes over here, counter is 0 less than array dot length, and array dot length at this point is going to give you the value of 3220. So all these space that you have, so that's 1 2 3, almost about, I think about 10 of them. Okay, so it's going to say, okay, this is going to be less than 10, and then I'm going to come in, system out print line, printf %5d, which is decimal but space of 5, and then %8d, another space, again a decimal, %n takes you to the next line, and then I'm going to be print my counter. So my counter at this point is 0 and array counter. So now I go inside the element of an array. So this is my array of 0. So what my value is 32, right? Now remember, I'm still within my loop, so I'm going to come back, increase my counter. Now it becomes 1. So is 1 less than 10? Array dot length less than 10? Yes. I'm going to come in again, print my counter, which is going to be 1, and array counter would be array, this is 1, which is 27. Is with me? So then again go back, counter 3 less than array, I'm sorry, 2 less than 10, yes. Come back, print 2, and then array of 2, which is now 64. Everybody good? So now if I run my array, and so here we go, index value 0, first one is 32, second one is 27, third one is 64, 18, 95, and it prints the whole thing. But over here I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and remember I put my value in 2, so my value is hard-coded, and counter equals 0, array 2 dot length. That's why you're actually getting this thread error. because remember the second one, I'm actually looking to see how big is this, the second array. Okay, so that's why I was getting that error. Let me correct it. Okay, and now I have, this is my initial one, which printed 0, 32, 1, 27, 264, went like this, and then I wrote my system out print line, my values hard coded coming from number 20, and then index and value, and remember my first one is 2, second one is 21, 62, 82, and 23. So a very simple example of how you can create an array, write a little for loop to go through the elements of an array and print the values out, and then you formatted it with, you know, the sizes, you know, and then also remember I put some sizes over here. So if I want to play and change some of these things, so I would have to change this 5D and 8D, make it 2 or 4, then it's going to be less of a space left between. So that's all formatting. But I kept on seeing quite a few students who talked about, I did not know how to format my decimals. Okay, now remember this is your printf. Okay, the other one that we are using, the print line. Okay, and also this parameter, look at how you're separating them with comma. With a print line you do a plus. All right, question here, everybody good? All right, so let's move on. And I think I'm just going to bring this one up, but it's really the same program. What it's doing is, remember how we created the previous array with all the values like 32, 27? Over here they're doing a different thing where they're first of all defining a constant called array length. All right, so this is my constant, which is array length, and it's final. Okay, so it's telling me that I'm not going to change this array length. It is int, and this is my constant equals 10, and see how it is all caps. That's pretty much the conventional way of showing that that is a constant variable. All right, so now I create an array new int and pass my array underscore length, which basically is what? 10. So I create an array of size 10, and then I have a for statement, goes through my counter less than array length, and then what it does is it assigns a value to the individual element. So remember the first time it's 0, right? So then array counter, this is array of 0, equals 2 plus 2 times counter. So what's my counter value the first time? 0, right? So 2 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. So that's why my element array counter, array 0, is 2. The next time I increment my counter to 1, again it is 1 less than array dot length less than 10. Yes, I'm going to come in array counter, how I'm going to change my 0 to my first element. 2 plus 2 times 1, that's 4, right? So I'm going to go through and assign, the first one is 2, 4, 6, 8, but that's a regular interval number. Now not always do you actually get to write something like this. Not always do you have an increment by 2. You know, it can be various different kinds of value. And then I come in and do the same thing again. I'm running my for loop to go through my individual array element and displaying the value out. Everybody good with it? All right, let's look at another program. So I'm not going to run this one. Let's look into this one, sum array. So now in the previous two programs we just looked into how we create an array, assign some values, and then extract those values out by writing our for loops to go through and extract the values out. Okay, now let's do some math with that number that we are taking in. So with my sum array, I'm going to come back to my Eclipse, and this is my array list. I can click on my array list, go on to class, and create another class. Now I want to point out something over here. With NetBeans, we have to go specifically to that source. Remember that source package, and then right click there. But with an Eclipse, it does not create a separate library. I can just come to the project, right click, and it just adds it to the source. Okay, so this one I'm calling it sum array, and I don't want to write my public static void main, and I'm going to come in and do this. Now I have my array like this. So let's take a look, and if I run my program, now this is also something over here in NetBeans. I had to come in, run the program. That's when the class is created, and then I select it to run my program. Over here it automatically defaults to it. Total array elements 849. So what it's doing is it defines an array, and then it defines some values for that array. It also defines a variable called total, stores or initialize it with a 0, and then it is running a for loop to go through my array length and then extracting the values out. So the first time my counter is 0, so my array 0 is going to be 87. It's going to add to the total. So initially my total was 87. Okay, now I have 87 stored in here, but again I'm still within my for loop. I'm going to come to my counter, increment that to 1 less than array length, yes. Go to my second element, I'm going to add 68, add to my total. So that's how I kept on adding all these numbers, and then it says total of array elements is 849. No problem with this? None, right? Okay. Now, can we not make this array a little more interactive? You see these things are all hard-coded, right? Can we make it a little more interactive? Absolutely. I don't always like these things, so how do we do it? We can say int my array equals new int all right. So I say 5, okay, and then what if I do something like this? Scanner keyboard equals new scanner system.in, and it's going to complain about my scanner. I'm going to click over here and add my scanner. All right, so now I can ask system, I'm going to ask the user, please input value %d Let me know if you do not follow what I'm doing. This is pretty simple. I ++, and then within this I'm going to write this for loop. Please input my value. I'm going to change this thing to printf %d %n I plus 1. And then store my value in my array I equals, yes, Shanice, yes. Robert, would you do me the favor, please? Thank you. kb dot next int So what I'm doing is I'm defining a keyboard object and then trying to take the value in from the keyboard and store it in my new array called my array. Okay, and then I can write the same thing here, where I'm going to define j less than my array dot length and j plus plus I need to define my total, so I'm going to say int my total equals 0. You see what I'm doing? So this, and complaining about something, counter. All right. So let's go through the program. So what I did was I defined my total, and then I defined a new array called my array of the size 5. I defined my scanner object, and then I wrote my for loop to say please input value %d %n I plus 1. You know, I did not want my value 0 to show up, but again, I mean, if you want, I can always change that one to I, and that way it's going to be please input value 0. Okay, so please input my value 1, and I say I want to do 87. Okay, input my value 2. So see what is happening. So it's going through my int I equals 0. So 0 less than my array dot length, which is 5. Come in over here, input value, and then the first one was 1. Okay, I took my value and I stored it in my array 0th element. So my 87 is stored in my 0th element, but again I have not come out of the loop, so I'm going to go back and increment my loop over here, which is my I plus plus. So now it becomes 1 less than 5. I'm going to come in, now it becomes 1 plus 1 2, and it's changed to 1 now. So now whatever value I input, so I say 47, 42, 21, 54. Okay, so total array elements, that's not right, is going to be my total. Okay, so now if I run it one more time, so it's 77, 55, 66, 22, 55 again, 4. Okay, so the total from this one is 849, and the total from 55, 66, 22, 55, and 4 is 432. So now I make my array interactive, so I do not now have to hard code any of my values. Okay, now sometimes I don't even like this one. See how I save my 5? I can even do something like this. Right? System dot out dot print line, please input the number you want to add. Okay, and then I'm going to store that value in size equals kb dot next int. Okay, and then pass size here. How about that? So now I make it a little more interactive because I don't know how many numbers I would like to type. So if I now do it and if I run it, I got some errors and you guys did not do a good job in correcting me. Size b next int. What's the problem here? KB cannot be resolved. Oh yes, because I need to move this one over here. So it's all your fault, right? All right, how many numbers you want to add? And I say I only want to add 2 numbers. And then 88, 2, and we're done. So my other one was 849 and the other one is what? 155. That's not right. Where is he getting 155 from? Total 0. My array dot length. I'm sorry? Size. No? That's right. But you kind of get what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make it interactive. So no, I don't need okay, 4. So 55, 33, 2, and 1. That more like it. So now it's 849 and 91. So now we have written some simple array where we made it very interactive. Okay, now before I move on to the next program, I wanted to give you a hint. Once I make something like this interactive, can I not put it in some kind of a method? And then anytime I would write any other program, I can just use my, remember my class name, so it's going to be some array dot, if I call it interactive input of array, let's say I call that method interactive input array, and then I just call that method, which is basically going to run it and create an array with a size. So it starts from the very beginning. You know, how many numbers do you have? How many grades do you want? You know, how many students you want to input? Whatever your scenario is, you're going to create that array, take some of the values in, and then you know exactly what is stored in here, and then you take that array and make it do whatever it's trying to do in your program. All right, moving on. So let's look at the bar chart program. You come to my array list over here, go to new, a class, and I'm going to call it bar chart. No public method, finish, come in and do this. Okay, now this is what I was talking about here. If I do not want this, okay, and if I go back and write my interactive method as a method, I can probably call that and make it interactive, where I just say how many numbers do you want and then go from there. Okay, but let's take a look. So here is my array first. So this is my array, and then I have come up with some hard-coded values that are going to be stored in the array called array. Now, how do we know the size? Depending upon the numbers that I put in, it knows how big of an array it needs to be creating. So for loop int counter equals 0, counter 0 less than array dot length, which is 10. I'm going to increment my counter, but what it's doing is it's going to output some certain values, and it then says if counter equals 10, system out printf 5d comma 100. So this is basically the spacing that they are doing. Okay, so 5 decimals, so a bigger space, and then comma 100. So if the counter equals 10, that's when it is going to be printing this 100. However, if the counter is not equals 10, then it's going to come to this else loop or else condition over here, not a loop, but else condition over here, and it is then saying system.out.printf %02d dash %02d, and then you have a counter times 10 comma counter times 10 plus 9. So the value, which is this value over here, is going to come from this value here. So the first time it is 0, right? Your counter is initialized to 0, correct? 0, 0 less than 10. I'm going to come in over here. If my counter equals 10, the answer is no. I'm going to come into my else statement. Then I'm going to say 0 times 10, which is 0, comma 0 times 10, which is a 0 again, plus 9. All right, so let's run this program and see how it's going to run. See this 00 to 09, this is basically printed out from here. This output bar level 00 to 90 and 100. So the first time it's 00 to 09, 10 to 19. Okay, so this is basically been printed over here. See it how? So the next time, okay, I increment my counter to 1, right? So this becomes 1, 1 less than 10, yes. So the next time it's counter 1 times 10, which is 10, comma counter 1 times 10 plus 9, that's 19. So that's why you have this label 10 to 19. Guys with me? So this else statement is printing 0 to 09, 10 to 19, 20 to 29. Now when it becomes 100, then you do not have this 90 to 99. You're going to print 100 directly. So you can write, or you can have the program do anything that you would like. Okay, so that's what I'm doing over here. Now this is part of the if-else statement within the for loop, right? So it actually, when it prints the else, it does not finish. It has to go through this for loop now. Okay, what is this for loop doing? It's saying, okay, I have a for loop where I have a counter starting with 0. The counter is initialized with stars. Stars less than array counter. So here is my array. Okay, so if I have a 0 over here, it's a system out print star. Okay, so it's taking a look and seeing if I come across some of these things or not. So it's going to say, if I am going to count the number of ones I have, then I'm going to print 1 star. Okay, and then you have a system out print line. So when I have zeros, I don't print anything. When I come across 1, I print 1 star. When I come across 2, I print 2 stars. Okay, so depending upon the number that I have, I'm going to print the number of stars. Okay, so if I have 2, I'm going to come in and make sure that I have 2 stars printed before I come out of printing my star. So of course, when I have 0, I can print anything. So 10 to 19, nothing. 20 to 19, nothing. Now if I would put a number here, let's say 1, then I would have 1 star printed right over here. Yes, with me? So now if I do this, so I'm creating a bar chart with a range of numbers. So also a good program, when I ask you to be creative, to take your grade, take your bill, take your monthly expenses, and create a bar chart from that. That way it easily you can see how much you're spending on certain categories, right? So if you do a monthly expense chart, your utility, your rent, your gas expense, your food expense, your entertainment, and then make it all interactive. Ask the user, ask what different kind of categories that they have, 5 categories, create an array, input the values, go through it, and create something like this. Okay,